We always do.
Yeah, I mean, the show's pretty good.
Yeah.
We're not bad at this. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dogs and cats, children or babies, shout out to Manny Fresh. This is the Driveline Academy podcast. I am your host, Deven Morgan, Director of Baseball at Driveline, founder of said academy, and I'm joined, as per usual, by my assistant director, partner, international man of mystery, Jeremy Tectiel. Shout-outs. I almost forgot the shout-outs, and I made a note to myself about shout-outs and then almost forgot them. Axbat.com, code DL20, Dear Legionnaire 20.
Okay.
DL20, 20% off, axbat.com. Note, as per usual, that goes directly into our scholarship funds. So if you are looking for a bat, I would just ordinarily suggest you take a look at Axbat regardless, but given the fact that you're also going to enable to allow us to continue to train kids for free or for reduced fees and help them get better, if you're in on that mission and you happen to need a new bat, well, fortunately we have a well-calculated scenario that allows you to kind of do both things. DL20, Dear Legionnaire 20.
Also, they make a good fungo.
Oh, yeah.
If you're in the market for a fungo, they make a good fungo.
A pretty resilient one also.
A very resilient fungo.
If you have a fit of rage and you try to break it, it's going to test you.
Yeah.
I can speak to that from personal experience. From when I was a much younger, more fiery man.
I go for the clipboard. It's much easier to break than a bat.
Yeah. Not as satisfying.
No. But less painful on your knee if it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Although one of my 15-year-olds told me he tried to channel me during a golf match and broke the shaft of one of his clubs.
Oh, that'll teach it.
Over his knee. And I was like, that's metal, my guy. That's a really bold move. And it worked. So shout out Ben.
Hey, I mean, you gotta make that club pay.
Well, and I was like, did your parents get mad? Right? Golf clubs are not cheap. And you got mad at a freshman golf event and broke a club. They can't be super happy with that. And he was like, nah, they were really cheap clubs, so it's fine. All right.
Oh man. If you're looking for a good fungo that's going to be hard for you to break, axbat.com, code DL20, 20% off.
You can even do what we may have done a little bit yesterday and use a youth underload as a fungo.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah, it works.
It works. At one point, the youth underload was the only bat that I could swing without massive amounts of arm pain.
Yeah.
Which is pretty tight.
Ball comes off a little hot, but
hey, figure it out. And as per usual, we're nearing 6 weeks away from the book coming out. It's on the way. It's literally happening.
The training manual.
Yes, the training manual.
I got you.
And actually, as a matter of fact, the formal name for it, the Skills at Scale, the Complete Youth Baseball Training Manual. That's what it's going to be called.
It's a pretty good name.
I mean, I hope so. And I'm sure that what's going to happen is because I call it the Complete Youth Baseball Training Manual, that someone's going to say, well, you didn't address this, and you didn't address this. And the best part is it's you don't realize that for the majority of the stuff that you could say that that should be in there, it's not in there on purpose because there's other stuff that's more important. Right. There's larger ROI to be had.
I noticed you didn't mention how to do PFPs with youth players in that book.
I don't think there's one word about PFPs.
I believe the word bunt doesn't show up in that book, although it might while we're making fun of it.
Yeah, there's probably something in there about bunting. Not a fully unhinged rant, more of just hey, if you can't harness the amount of time from 6 to 16 to teach a kid how to hit, man, that's not about you, or that's not about the kid. That's about you.
Yeah.
Anyways, so
save the unhinged rant for the podcast.
Yes. Well, I
all unhinged rants belong.
I promise we are going to have many more unhinged rants in the future. So the book is on the way. We're probably 6 weeks away from pre-release. Going to be road showing this thing at some coaching conferences and just other big coaching groups. And if you happen to be running one of those things, or you're planning to attend one and you want to maybe have someone from Driveline that is close to 50 years old and losing hair but has a beard to make up for it and can talk.
Losing hair, but not down here.
can talk your ear off about youth baseball development, Deven at drivelinebaseball.com with 2 E's. Reach out to me, holler at me, we'll talk. So the thing we are going to talk about today is kind of really getting into the weeds of long-term development. And I think more specifically, not even the weeds, the peaks and valleys.
Yeah. Because
I think having that perspective to understand that there's going to be good days and bad days is highly critical for training an athlete of basically any age. But when you're talking about kids, even more so, because as discussed ad nauseum on this pod, they need context. They're going to struggle with context, and it's important for parents and coaches and adults to be able to provide it. So like we can talk about what those start to look like. As your friendly youth baseball weatherman, I'll put this chart somewhere right around
You are
here.
pretty good at that.
Yeah.
And like placing it on the video.
My recommendation, start filming and directing rap videos and then do a podcast about youth baseball. And you acquire a very unique set of skills.
That's true.
So in said chart that we'll put right here, I literally put together a 3-year chart of one of the players in the academy who's been with us since the absolute jump. And the visual outline of like what skill development really looks like. Yeah. And I think it's important for us to just like have this thing sitting on the screen for a while, because we say all the time that like progress isn't linear.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to say that. Yeah. I think it's much more difficult to be the athlete that is dealing with the reality that progress is not linear.
Yeah.
Because I think it changes your expectations, you know? And like when those expectations constantly have to be adjusted and modified, and you're a child, that's a pretty wild combination to have. Yeah.
I think we do a pretty good job of setting our kids' expectations and making sure that they understand there's going to be good days and bad days, right? Like a thing that I tell the kids pretty often are like, the days that make you better aren't the days that you PR. It's the days where you aren't feeling great, you are not swinging great or throwing great, and you still come and put the work in anyways. You don't get to the days where you get to PR if you don't struggle through those days first.
Man, it's so important.
And like the kids generally get it. Like most of our kids, I do believe, understand that development is not linear. Like I have kids telling me that development is not linear. And I think, something you said that's super important is making sure that the parents and the coach are providing the correct context for that. And I think something that we haven't done a great job of, which we're working on, is making sure the parents know what context the coach is providing and they can provide the same context.
Yeah, because having to whatever degree you gain a ton of leverage to have both parties be on the same page there, right. There's also that opportunity to create chaos and create dissension because both parties aren't on the same page.
100%. And that's, I think, what you see more often, honestly. Like, you have a practice, and like, I think, a lot of our parents don't watch the practices, right? So, kid gets in the car, you're going to ask, and, go back to shout out PCA, but it's like, the first question you ask is like, how did it go?
Yep.
Did you PR? Like most of our parents want to know if the kid PR'd, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's, they're Driveline parents. They understand we track the data, and like PR is like a great thing to happen at a practice. But if that's the first question and the answer is no, which depending on the age, the answer is going to be no way more often than it is yes.
Yep.
Are you saying the same thing to your kid that we are? And like most of the time, no. And it is counterproductive when they feel really good at practice. Even though they didn't PR, they feel like they put in work, they put in a good day, they got a little bit better today. Yeah. Even if they didn't do what they wanted, they got a little bit better today. They didn't get worse. And they get in the car, and they feel like they did worse.
And I think one of the simplest ways to change the framing of that conversation is to ask a different question. What did you work on today?
What did you work on today? Yeah.
Because you're literally trying to open up the window for them to start to expand about the context of that day's training.
Right.
And we know internally that different days have different focuses.
Right.
And I suppose you could distill that focus down to like 3 things if you wanted to be super reductive about it, right? Like, we are always going to want you to be on time, hit the ball hard, and hit the ball far.
Yeah.
And I suppose like that is, if you've got like an obstinate 13-year-old, that could just be like the answers. Well, I'm just trying to hit the ball, Dad. Okay, but what about that are you trying to work on right now relative to how you're performing and whatever the ideal or the goal is?
Right. And, days change, right? So like on our bat speed days, we only really focus on one of those 3.
Correct.
Right? We're not necessarily focusing on being on time. We're focusing on being dangerous, making like quality contact, doing damage. It's totally okay to swing and miss a bunch.
Yep.
And then we'll do a different day where we're focusing on bat to ball. The goal today is you get points for between 10 and 25 degrees.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's not about bat speed. It's not about PRing today. Like, you're going to get points for hitting line drives because we're probably too many balls up or hitting too many ground balls, whatever adjustment we need to make there. So, like, those are always, the 3 goals of hitting, if you will, are like, be on time, make flush contact, hit the ball hard. But that's going to change based on the cage environment day to day. And I think we do a pretty good job of making sure our kids know what the goals are in the cage that day.
Yeah.
We don't do a very good job of making sure, which I'm not going to say it's intentional, but like, most of our energy and efforts go towards making sure the kids know what's going on, and we don't spend enough effort and energy into explaining to the parents exactly what we're doing with the kids, which like we're working on. We're starting to do a little bit better bridging that gap, but I think that like most kids do understand that development is linear and that some days they're going to be better than others, especially as they're growing. We talk a lot to these kids about the general adaptation syndrome and like how development works, like how bodies work, how you recover, how important the recovery is to whether you're going to be able to rebound from that recovery and actually PR. And like most of our kids at any age could tell you what the most important parts of recovery are. And like most of those kids, if they go a few weeks without PRing and you actually sat them down and started a conversation as to why haven't you PR'd in a couple weeks, they'd probably give the exact answer, whether it's I'm not eating well.
Yeah.
I was thinking not too much, but I was thinking more about school than I was about baseball when I was here because I was struggling in a certain class or whatever. Or like, I got a PS5. I was up way too late playing video games because I just got a PS5 and like, whatever it is, most of our kids could tell you exactly why their development was in a valley during that last 2 weeks and what they need to do to turn it into a peak, into a little bit better.
And if your perspective, if you have the ability to zoom out a bit, I think your perspective is inherently changed in a way that you have a little bit greater tolerance for those peaks and the valleys, right? Because you have a large enough kind of sample size of data. The problem with not training with that same data is that you have no reference point to kind of come back to.
Right.
And you don't even know what your peaks look like. You have no idea what your valleys look like. And then, let's say you do the thing that my son did this weekend. Sleep over with his good friend's house. They went to bed at 3:00 in the morning. They woke
Saturday?
up. They woke up at 6
a.m.
Yes.
Okay.
So 3 hours of sleep. It's going that event, and I think you could even frame that as a good, healthy social experience for basically any
do
kid
it.
to
Have
be able
fun.
to have. You got to have that.
Yes.
But you also have to understand that that deficit of somewhere between 6 to 7 hours of sleep that you missed is going to take a while to kind of normalize. Yeah. And if like I'm a data-driven guy in so much as it matters, and I don't typically like bird dog my kids hitting in here, but I would assume that if I look at today's practice, like literally today's practice. Yeah. I'm not expecting his numbers to be particularly great. I wouldn't expect today to be a PR.
Now, if it is, 3 hours of sleep a night is now the new standard.
Yeah, now we've got
right. That's how that works. I believe.
This is the Michael Jordan and the KFC before a game.
Yeah.
It's, okay, well, you're just the best basketball player on the planet right now, so what are we going to tell you?
He pulled all-nighters and gambled.
Right.
So
Right.
pretty sure I can do that and get away with it. Right? That's how that works.
That's how that works.
I love you, Michael. Just to be clear there.
And like...
That wasn't an insult. That was pride.
Yeah. I mean...
That was pride growing up a Chicago Bulls fan.
And I'm glad that I didn't realize Jordan was such a degenerate gambler until later.
Knowing that my guy can stay up all night gambling, smoking cigars, and drinking, and still wake up and beat your guy the next day.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah,
it's a good way to grow
That's pretty wild. But I think this is one of the things that, man, I'm just going to tell you the benefit of being able to train with this data is it grants me as a parent what this perspective for what this stuff looks like.
Yeah.
So what I'll try to do is we'll zoom in a little bit. I don't know if I'll just show the same graph or I'll do some fancy stuff. But if you look at kind of this timeline, right, starting October of 2020 and max EV and top 8 was around mid 5s in the low 60s. Yeah. You get into...
And what age was that?
This was 13U. So by the time you get into November-ish, those numbers went into... Now we're talking about mid 6s, 65, getting closer to 70. Standard disclaimer... Again, part of the thing you need to be aware of when you're looking at data is start to consider this idea of sample size. You have to consider this idea of training environment, right? And this chart is not like a perfectly... Every entry on here is the same exact training environment over the course of the whole thing, right? There's a ton of variance in there. Anyway, so we get from somewhere where we're like, high 5s, low 6s until we get into... By about April, May of that year, now we're up firmly into the 7s, But along with that, there's this period of February-ish where back down in the 5s. Mm-hmm. And that's that moment where the kid is going to need some context.
Yeah.
The kid is absolutely going to need some context. And even more so when there's a period, like you said, of all this biological growth that accelerates all this other stuff. And to be honest, we're talking about that was COVID. Like gym was shut down. Man, like it was. Yeah, that was a weird period of time. Dug out of those valleys, found some new peaks, and then you find, what is this in? This is October of 21. Finds the first 75. The path to get there was not always sunshine and rainbows. Like the path required a lot of persistence.
Yeah. Like life.
And I think, largely the reason that we're so strong in the way that we advocate for the value of data and training is because it grants you perspective that you just don't have otherwise.
Yeah. Context is so important. Like when you have a kid who thinks he should be throwing harder than he does, or doesn't understand why a kid that is smaller than him is hitting balls harder than him. Or just things like that, where there are these existential almost moments in these athletes' lives where if I can't turn around and provide context to why that is, they may just quit. Because they may get from that, well, I've peaked. I've hit my max, now I'm going down, this kid who's 70 pounds lighter than me is hitting the ball harder than me. I'm never going to be good at this. There's my sign. So I'm going to be done. Whereas I can say, well, no, that's not quite it. Right. You're in a valley right now of your development and hey, you just grew a bunch. You're trying to relearn. And one of the things, one of my 15U kids, which I made sure he knew how rare of a gift this is, but he's a good hitter, a good in-game hitter, less confident and comfortable against machines. And we wanted to make some tweaks. And we're out of game season.
Yeah.
But we wanted to make some tweaks to get him to find some more barrels.
Perfect time for it.
Because body-wise, he's great. He just needs to find more consistent flush contact. He sucked for like 6 weeks.
Yep.
And he was totally willing to suck for 6 weeks because he bought in that like the changes you're making, it's going to take me a while to get comfortable with it. And I'm going to suck until I get comfortable with it. But I trust because you're telling me why you're doing this, you use the data, you gave me the context, then I'm just going to leave this in your hands and I'm going to trust that it's going to turn around. And like the amount of therapy sessions, if you will, that me and this kid had when I came back, because I would get messages from him when I was in Europe that like I would.
We're talking about the one that just like couldn't hit anything, even like middle, right?
Yes, the one who just hurt himself. Yeah. And he would send me messages when I was in Europe that would just be like the most forlorn. Like I forgot what it's like to hit a baseball, and like he's there 3 times a week hitting the cages, and just like really struggling through this change with only data and context as evidence that like the reason we're doing this is going to work. That was the valley, and then it clicks, and now we get this peak where he hits a PR and he is so excited, and now confidence is back. And it right up until he fell down a mound doing a walking windup and hurt his ankle.
And it wasn't even just a single ball, like he just like hit another max. It was that like he started to look hitterish.
Yes. Yeah.
He started to look very hitterish.
Yep. And just linea after linea after linea.
Yep.
In like in top eighth, and just like, oh, yep, it worked. Like the swing change that you wanted worked, and it is, and I get this a lot from parents of like, we don't do enough coaching. You don't make enough. My kid's swing looks the same as it did when he came, or my kid's throwing motion looks the same as it did when they came. And I think parents think that we're way more of miracle workers than we are, or that their kids are way more coachable than they are. Very few kids are super willing to have their entire thing tweaked, whether it's the swing or the throwing motion. A lot of kids feel like, especially in a select ball setting, I got here doing this. Right. It's like the kid that gets drafted that, the MLB team says like, we want to make these adjustments. He's like, whoa, you just spent $5 million on me because I did this to hit, and now you're trying to change that.
Right.
It's a similar setup where like not every kid that comes through these doors is super coachable and is willing to struggle for 6 weeks, to go into a valley for 6 weeks while we're trying to work on something with the faith that I'm going to come out of this valley because I can't give you a timeline on that.
Yep.
Maybe it took them a week and a half, right? Like when we do pitch designs and we change a grip on a breaking ball, we have kids who throw good breaking balls, and we're still going to tweak the grip because you got a great curveball. It's a little slurvy, and it's really good at 14U.
Yeah.
We're going for longer than 14U here. So like what we're trying to do is provide a little bit, give you more of a 12-6 and more of a horizontal slider or a sweeper, and provide a little bit of separation with those two.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to work on in this pitch design. You already have a good curveball. We're going to tweak your grip and tweak how you're throwing it. And your curveball is not going to look good for a few weeks.
Yep.
Until you get comfortable throwing with the new grip. And the vast majority of kids, and it's not their fault, I'm not saying they're bad kids, the vast majority of them aren't willing to put their faith in that.
Yeah, and I think there's two things that I think are very worthwhile for us to underline here. One is that kid still felt comfortable to communicate that to you. And I think it's one of those things where if you just kind of talk about it, you're kind of like, you release the pressure a little bit. Like, hey man, like I forgot what it feels like to hit a.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, okay. Now we've said that, and I will say that kid, in so much as I was around Kozak talking to him, or I was just doubling down on what the same thing that you guys are saying. There were some days where he was super dejected. There were also some days where it was just like he was able to wear it in a way that didn't have him be super dejected.
Yeah.
And like, I think literally just like, this is like a mental health thing, like being able to talk about it in a way where you're just being honest, you're not hiding it, and you're acknowledging it, I think changes the framing of it. The other thing is that kid was so flippin' consistent throughout that whole period of time. So imagine you're a 14-year-old kid. You went from being a pretty good athlete to an athlete that could be a lot better if you understand that there's some changes that need to be made. And in the interim, your performance is going to suffer. Like just straight up.
Yeah.
Your performance is going to suffer. And to whatever degree performance is definitive about your own sense of self, that thing is going to go away for a while.
Yeah, you're going to need Tommy John for your ego.
And being able to be consistent with stimulus, right, and not shy away from that, I think it's a courageous thing. I mean, that is the type of courage you want to see in a young person who's like, I'm going to walk into the facility today, and I don't think that there is any amount of success that is just a given anymore.
And the coaching here does not play a non-zero part in that. In creating the environment that is like, you're wearing a blast sensor, so yeah, you forgot what it felt like to hit a baseball, but like you might foul a few off, which give us some blast data on the swing, and we can tell you, hey, you're swinging faster, and like your attack angle is better than it was. Like this is the main thing, because the kid's problem was not bat speed, it was attack angle.
Yeah,
and like that was what we were trying to fix. He understood it. He knew why we were trying to do it and was willing to like listen to us when we said, hey, it is getting better. Like that doesn't work and he doesn't stay the course if there's not like a little bit of a flash at every practice that like, oh, maybe this is like the right thing to do for me. Like you're going to see 90 balls and maybe like 4 of them like you feel that on, but like you do need like that little bit of context to be like, hey, like it is working a little bit. Like we just got to keep staying the course.
Yep.
Keep staying consistent. It is going to work. I promise you. And it's the same thing with learning a new grip or whatever it is. Like, yeah, nobody is going to learn a new grip and within 10 times throwing that pitch going to be like, yeah, man, that's it.
Yeah.
Like I have seen kids work on a grip in PD and like first time throwing it, throw a banger of a pitch. And they're like, oh yeah, like solved it, locked it in, and then the next 3 are terrible, and it's like, oh, I'm going back to the old one. No, don't do that thing.
Yeah,
like this takes time to really learn a new skill, and like I think people take for granted how difficult swing changes are. Yeah, and like throwing mechanic changes are, and like most kids are not, especially without like the data and the context and the environment, are just not going to be willing to suck for an undetermined period of time while they go through one of these changes. Because they don't understand that even if you don't go through one of these changes, you're going to suck for a period of time.
Sure.
Like that's how this works. Like you're not always going to be good. And if you're always good, change your training stimulus, make it harder.
And I think when I think about the exact opposite of that scenario, it's literally the second video that we talked about last episode.
Mm-hmm.
It's that dad wearing out his kid because the kid, quote unquote, cannot hit today.
Right.
In the absence of data, that dad and that player has zero context for what's going on. Right? There's you just can't hit.
Right.
Which is a very like black and white way to frame anybody's performance.
Right.
And I think it's potentially driving off of a cliff with a young 100%. Kid, because that conversation with the dad and the young kid from last episode very well could have been like, hey, well, our bat speed isn't any different. Over these from last weekend to this weekend, bat speed isn't any different. Your attack angle's -20. Like you're cutting through the zone. So we got to choose. When you use this stuff correctly, you can't tell me it doesn't help you coach better. You just can't. You just can't, because you're able to understand what's going on and frame it in a way that you're actually giving the athlete a path towards some type of progress.
Well, and for me, I'm always very conscious of the fact that they cannot absolutely rely on a coach to tell them everything they need to do to correct and change and every adjustment they need to make. Because if we set up a system where that has to happen, we are failing this athlete when he gets to games. Because if he can't make that adjustment on the mound or in the box and understand what did I do wrong there and how do I fix it, then our coaching was totally ineffective.
Yeah.
If he can't make that on his own. And like that's a lot of what the data helps us do is let the kids learn how to pull context from the data and from certain numbers and like read a swing. Right? Like you don't have hit tracks in a game. So if you swung and if you swung and missed or you swung and fouled it off or whatever, you need to be able to know, was I late? Was I early?
Yeah.
Was it my timing? Was it I just didn't make flush contact? Where's the adjustment I need to make there to make the contact on the next pitch? And that all has to happen in about 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And you can't help him in that situation. You can't help the athlete in that situation. So like the more we set up a system where like the athlete is relying on me to coach him every swing and make every adjustment for him, and the less willing that athlete is to learn how to figure some of this stuff out on their own, which is a lot of what our program is like we give them the data, we direct them, but like it is up to them.
Yeah.
To like make the adjustments and make the changes. Like we don't have consequences if, we tell them to do one thing and they decide I'm not going to make that swing change, even if it might make me better in the long term. Like it's going to make me worse in the short term and I'm not going to make that swing change. That's your choice as an athlete. It's your career. I can't force you to make a swing change. So like, but they have to know that and they have to have that enough information from us in the first place to understand what those things are that they need to make adjustments to, and like go through the understanding that like you are going to get worse whenever you make an adjustment.
Yeah. Whenever
you make a major adjustment, you are going to go through a period of time where you're back to figuring it out. And then it's going to get way better.
Yeah. I'll never forget, Driveline OG Max Gordon made that same point years ago. Might have been talking to Art and just going like, hey, look, you're going to be in the box by yourself. I'm not there with you.
Yeah.
And I think this whole, again, the reason we stump for data, and I think that the benefit and the leverage that gives the athlete is you get kind of a path towards what good actually looks like.
Right. You develop a feel for the numbers.
Right. Right. And which I think just allows you to increase the rate of adjustment.
Yeah.
Better than you would otherwise. You can't tell me that that's not something that we're able to do.
Yeah.
I mean, so to kind of come back to the chart here, right? So we get to, that next offseason, the 2021 offseason. So now all of a sudden our old peaks are basically kind of the baseline. Yeah. We get a new peak in and around May of 22. So tail end of the 21-22 season, we finally pop a ball over 80. Max 80. Some of our top eights are above 75, 76-ish. So like now again, the top eighth number is 15 miles an hour, 16 miles an hour up from where it used to be.
Yeah.
The peak is almost 20 up. But then there's this period of time from May through October. Not a single ball over 80. $5 months. Like 5 months. And there's tons of trading data in here. The top eighth number is kind of like stabilizing, a little up, little down. So you got some mid sevens.
Wait, so you're telling me kids don't necessarily get better in season? When he's playing games in May, June, July, you're telling me that he doesn't.
Yeah.
He's not developing exit velocity just by playing games.
Yeah.
He's actually getting worse by playing too many games.
I might tell you that the cumulative fatigue of all of that might actually have a definitive negative effect on your ability to not only like increase skill, but just to maintain it.
Huh.
Super weird.
The more you know.
And I might go one step further and say the whole reason that like increasing your maximum capacity is it brings the floor with you. So if you know you're experiencing or expecting some amount of like skill degradation in the competition phase, you need to bring the max up.
Yeah.
Because if it brings everything up with it, then you're kind of just changing your floor.
Yep.
Shout
out to Eric Kozak, who we will bring on this pod at some point. But he said, we were talking like a week and a half ago, and he said the most impactful coaching advice he ever got was, I need you to be okay with being really good today.
Yeah.
And not being great today, but just being really good today. Like, I just need you to be okay with being really good today. And the amount of times in the short amount of time that I heard that from him, the amount of times that I've relayed that to my athletes, because like good athletes hit a point. Generally, it's going to be right around the beginning of high school, and then definitely as you go later, where development's harder.
Yeah.
PRs are way more infrequent, and like, it's easier to go from 70 to 80 than it is from 85 to 90. Much easier to do that. And like, a lot of the low-hanging fruit has been picked off. They've done a lot of like the baseline work, and now it's like the really hard work of like, you have to gain more strength, and your power production, your force production has to go up. And like, we can, there are some tweaks we can make in the cage, but like, for the most part, like, you are kind of maxed out where your body is right now. Like, you're already overperforming what your body should be able to do because you move really well. And we just need to add strength to that. But these are kids that, like, if you get this group that's like really dedicated and really likes training and really leans into that stuff, this is going to be a group that goes from constant PRs over 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 where they're like, they're PRing every other week.
Yeah.
They feel like this is working. I'm getting way better. And they know it works, but then the doubt starts to creep in when it gets harder. And it's like, I've been stuck at 85.7 for the past month. It's like, this is one of those valleys that like, at this point, you kind of got to wait for strength growth. And then you're going to see that. And then you're going to go back into another peak because you've got new strength. You develop more strength. Like, those are much harder situations to like convince athletes to stay the course.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the 3 years that you've built up with them of like, this works, you just got to stay the course and be patient. It's very easy to understand why a lot of kids that we get that are new, 15U and up, we may struggle with buy-in immediately.
Yeah.
Because like, if you're looking for the program that's like, you've been here for a month and you've gotten so much better, like, well, for sure that's not us because our first month is an on-ramp. So like, we're going pretty slow month one.
Yeah.
And like, we still have kids expecting to PR in the on-ramp phase. And it's just like, that's not what this is for.
Yeah.
Like, you have to understand that like, it's okay to be really good today and just like perform to the best of your abilities and be really good. And you can be great every few weeks. And PR every few weeks.
Because even when you are really good, you are still compounding interest. Like, you still are. And so yes, data I think is hugely impactful to be able to kind of help people understand that this larger narrative of like the version you are now, or the version where you were versus the version you are now versus the version of where you want to get to. That's a long story.
Yeah. And continuously telling them that you understand how hard it is.
Yeah.
And like, this is a really difficult thing that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And it's okay to fail a bunch before you're successful, or like, just keep trying really hard until you're successful. This is a really hard thing to do.
And to get through those valleys, man, if you don't love it, I know that I'm, Mr. Emotional on here all the time, but like, I don't think that there's anything that's going to bring more leverage to this larger narrative than you have to love what you were doing. Mm-hmm. You have to love this thing in a deep way that isn't predicated on you have to be great every day.
Right.
We're going to win every day.
Yeah.
And the sum total of my perspective on everything that I think is wrong with youth baseball and this, like, the professionalization of the competition result is exactly that.
Yeah.
Because I think we are conditioning a generation of children who only engage with this game on those terms.
Mm-hmm.
You love it because you're winning.
Right.
Well, guess what, man? 90-foot bases are coming. It's going to equalize a lot of the horseshit way that you've approached this game from 9 through 12.
Yep.
And even if you aren't skill deficient, that natural stratification is just going to mean that, like, a lot of those competitors that you faced, who, to be frank, were probably not very good, those kids went away. So
Yep.
those mid-tier kids, now all of a sudden are seeing a giant increase in like the broad kind of competitive makeup of what they see on the other side of the diamond. And if you don't love it, because the only way that you have found that emotionally kind of fills your tank is when we're winning.
Yeah.
Right. What we talked about a couple episodes ago, what was that kid's record at 9U? It was like 40-2.
Yeah.
You know, like, yeah, I'd love it too.
Yeah.
I would love going to, you know, the Washington State Fair and going to like the carnival game and walking out every year with like 5 of those like human-sized dolls. But then when I go there and I just give my money and I get nothing, well, I don't love it as much.
Yeah, it sucks. Yeah.
You know?
This is rigged. It's rigged against me, right?
Yeah, you know, like, because ultimately, you're right. The thing that's going to push you through that is just you have to persevere. You have to be consistent. Data allows you to increase your ability to provide context for all these peaks and valleys. And if you do all of those things and you continue to do it because you love it, I think you are going to get to the ultimate truth of your narrative.
Yes.
Of how good you could possibly be. My wife and I don't watch a lot of reality television. Strangely, the show that we have started watching is Naked and Afraid.
Okay. They dump him out in the wilderness?
They dump him in the wilderness. Okay. They give you like a couple tools and you are naked as the day you were born and free to kind of do with it what you will.
But by yourself?
By yourself or with a team.
Oh, there's team setting. Okay.
Yeah. So the one that we're watching is the Legends one, right? So the idea is they've had a bunch of people that have done this show previously. They have some of the people on the show have tremendous amounts of like outdoors experience that you can also apply when you are naked as a jaybird.
Sure.
So the final, I'm going to spoil this for some of you. Show was broadcasted like May and June. So sorry, we're like 4 months later, whatever. It's the final like competition that they have to get to the what is that word? The second ultimate thing?
Penultimate.
The penultimate. Thank you. It is the penultimate competition. And what they have to do, naked, as per usual, with basically no tools, is they have to start a fire.
Okay.
So, you know, you're doing the thing where you have the board and you have like a dowel and you have a string and then you have some sort of bow thing that turns the dowel that generates enough ash that eventually get an ember that you can put into some tinder and actually get fire. I described that in about 10 seconds?
Yeah.
They literally spent somewhere around 40 hours naked in the wilderness in Africa trying to do this. It's like, I suppose that you could be skeptical and say, well, they're only doing it because there's a prize on the end, right? They're only doing it because they don't want to be embarrassed while they're on TV. I might offer that, like, if you're worried about being embarrassed on TV, you're probably not
going on that show.
That show.
Particular show, yeah.
You might go on Wheel. You know, you might go on Jeopardy, but you're not going to go out into the wilderness naked.
I don't know. Is there much more embarrassing than like Jeopardy if you just get the floor wiped with you?
You know, I mean, maybe, but at a certain point, if I'm just getting waxed, I'm just doing it for the lulz.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, if you're, you know, while James Holzhauer was on his run, it's like, honestly, I'd rather like go on and just get smoked by James Holzhauer than like lose by $100 on another random Jeopardy to like somebody who isn't one of the best of all time, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. I mean, you'd rather just get dominated by, you know, you go 21 up on Kobe, right? Like Kobe's you are not going to score.
Yes.
He's going to score all the points and like whatever. I'd rather do that than get beat by like, you know, my buddy.
Then put a bucket on Tristan Thompson.
Right? Yeah. So anyways, these guys are just, you know, in the wilderness trying to make fire. And I'm thinking about, you know, the reality of human evolution and how to some degree or another, we are here because some lunatic hundreds and thousands of years ago was crazy enough to like not quit.
Yeah. And now we're all the way back.
And now we're all the way back. And now we get to watch this for entertainment, right? And it's just, these guys are just going through this for some of them, like a really crazy amount of suffering, right? You're malnourished, you're not sleeping well, you're exposed to all the elements, and you have no tools. Yeah. And I think the other thing is, like, you're aware that it's 2023 and I could literally just get a lighter and start a fire, but instead I'm going to devote nearly 48 hours to this stupid task. So one guy gets it. One guy gets it, and he goes and talks to the other guy. He goes, Waz talks to Dan. He's like, hey, man, you've got it. Like, you just have to stay the course. You're getting the ember that you want. You've got the right kind of wood picked out. There's no secret. Yeah. I think he gave him some, like, minor tool or whatever, but he's like, you just got to...
He gave him an Axpat set of speed trainers.
Yeah, right. Axpat.com called DL20. He was just like, you just got it, man. You just got to keep going. You just got to keep going. Yeah. So they had... I think there were five people there. One guy got it. He goes, talks to the second guy. They go talk to the third guy. Of the two people that he talks to, one gets it. One guy medically taps out because at this point he is malnourished enough, cramping, fatigued, lightheaded. Like, it's just bad. He's just like, and of course he's the older guy on the show. So I'm like, oh yeah, great, perfect. One guy medically taps. One guy kind of just like gives up. He's like, hey man, I'm out of material. I've used all the wood that I've had. I got nothing else. And then one guy basically goes until sundown. All of them basically gave it everything. Two of them actually got to the goal. Yeah. But all of them, I think you could make the argument, literally expanded. They checked every box. Yeah. There's nothing more that
they got better.
Do. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And, and it's one of these things where, on one of the days, or I think previous to, it was raining. So a lot of the wood's wet.
Yeah.
You're trying, like, good luck making fire in Africa with no tools, no supplies, and it just got done monsoon pouring. Like, good luck with that. This stretch from like May through October, you don't sniff another 80. You just don't. Yeah. For 5 months. Yeah. And the more that we graphically expand, I think the more that we are being exposed for us internally to like the cold reality of this youth baseball machine that we've created. Because collectively, again, we are complicit as everybody else to a degree in that we take checks from parents to train kids. We just don't. We do this thing, not the other thing. And when you think about, again, that kid we were talking about last episode was on 22 teams from the age of 9U through 13 or 14, 22. Yeah. That amount of team hopping, it's like you're searching, right? Like, you're going from this place to this place to this place to this place to try to get the thing that you're searching for.
But you're not staying long enough to even find the thing that you're searching for. If you know what the thing you're searching for is at that point. But like, how can you? I mean, the team hopping thing is like not something that I really ever had a whole lot of experience with, right? Until very, very recently. Yeah. It's just like I have a really hard time just like understanding the logic of, well, this team wasn't good, so I'm moving to another team. Well, this one didn't go well, so I'm moving to another team. Like, there's no point in there that you look in the mirror.
These coaches know more.
Right. And then do they? But if they do, then why did you leave that next program then? Like, why? Like, if you leave 2, 3, 4 programs, there's probably reasons to explain that away. And like, it may be a little extreme, but like, there's always context there. 22 programs, that's just like, you have no idea what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And you're just staying somewhere for a couple weeks at a time, hoping that they can immediately make your kid the best kid on the team. It doesn't happen, and you're just like, well, that shortcut didn't work. Let me try another shortcut.
And I have to wonder, like, how does this story look different if you put a blast sensor on that kid's bat at 9?
Yeah.
We have so many kids that suffer in this environment where the only feedback that they get is an inherently untrustworthy and potentially bias-ridden assessment by coaches and parents who coach don't know enough.
Yeah.
And
Or the coach who tells you, like, this game's hard. Like, even the best guys fail 7 out of 10 times.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I hate that saying. Because what you're saying is it's a failure to not get a base hit.
And what does that mean? Right.
Like, you could have 10 phenomenal at-bats and go 0 for 10, and have 10 awful at-bats and wind up with 3 bloop singles.
Yeah.
And you were successful the second time or the first time?
Did you see the thing that was floating around about Acuna's like last 4 or 5 ABs?
I did not. I did see there was a lot of talk about, in all the other stuff that I ignored about the teams getting too long of a break or whatever. There was talk about, he's the reason they lost because he didn't hit super well in the playoffs. It's like, wow, it's a 15 at-bat sample size. Like, obviously he's a bad baseball player. We all know that Ronald Acuna isn't good at baseball, and this just proved it. This 3-game sweep just proved it.
Yeah, so I think if I remember correctly, his last 4 or 5 balls, all of them were like well over 100.
Yeah, I mean, he hit that ball that Rojas caught in center field that, like, you really didn't think. Yeah, it was 110 with the bases loaded in like the 7th inning.
Yeah.
And you did not think that guy was catching that ball. He didn't look confident that he was catching it. Yeah. And, like, that ball drops, brand new series.
Yeah.
But it didn't, and now, like, Acuna is bad. Like, he's the reason the Braves lost. Not like, let's look at what this man just did to just, I don't think there's a question he's going to win MVP. I love you, Mookie, but like, it's going to be Acuna. And, like, we just totally threw out 6 months of a season because in 3 games he wasn't very good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Like, hey man, that's the cold reality of the playoff format is, shout out to friend of the company, Eno Saris. From April 18th to April 21st, Matt Olson, Ronald Acuna, Mookie Betts, and Freddie Freeman combined for 58 plate appearances in a 143, 260, 262 line. Like, I don't think that is any of this is a slight on the playoff format.
No.
I think.
And all you need to know, if you're really the person complaining about the too much time off, if you were to give the teams the choice, you can play right away, or you can wait a few days.
You know the answer.
Like, if you're the 1 seed, you're allowed to choose whether or not you want the bye or you want the other team to have the bye. Yeah. Every one of them is choosing the bye.
Right.
Like, there's just no way anybody's not choosing the bye. It's like, that tells you everything you need to know about whether that is actually the reason why
it's such a
the Braves and the Dodgers lost.
It's such a dumb argument too, because, like, I mean, you look at how the Phils closed out, and you set that thing up where, like, 7, 8, 9 or 6, 7, 8, 9, those last 4 innings, we are in a position where we don't have to worry about rest. So because of that, we are going to exploit every matchup that we have. We are going to just dump the tank and sell out to win this game, and it worked.
Yeah.
Well, what does that tell you about the leverage you gain from having rest? Because then you just have more options on the table instead of that other thing where it's like, well, we just know that so-and-so has to start, tomorrow, and he's going to have to go 6.
Yeah.
He's going to have to maybe go 7 because we don't have the bullpen to do it because guys aren't rested enough.
Yeah. I mean, it's my argument for why people hate me during March Madness, because I root for all the Blue Bloods. It's like, yeah, Cinderella upsets are fun right up until you have, like, Butler and UConn playing the national championship,
sure.
And it's a rock fight. Like, I love the underdog right up until, like, and this is no offense to either of these teams, but Diamondbacks Phillies is the NLCS, right? Like, I don't know about you, I was really looking forward to Dodgers Braves. Would have loved to have seen Dodgers Braves. But, like, we get Diamondbacks Phillies, and that's okay. But, like, we're the humans are the people who love the underdog story right up until it means that, like, they can't watch the best teams play against each other. And there's always got to be a reason why, like, there's got to be an excuse why the Braves and the Dodgers get, swept out of the playoffs or whatever. Like,
right.
Or no, there doesn't have to be. That's the whole point of why the goal should just be to make the playoffs, because then anything can happen. And most GMs will tell you that is just their goal. Like,
yeah, that's just how it breaks sometimes. And, specific to this conversation, perspective, right? Acuna is going to be the MVP. I think by all rights, he's earned it. He also didn't have a great postseason. Like, both of those things can be true.
This is correct.
Right? Like that, both of those things can be true. And, right now in the current term, it's not going to change anything about like people looking at the Braves roster and being like, not just going like, hey, they have the most young locked up talent and are going to be very hard to beat for a very long time.
Yeah. And then you see articles the day after they lose that are like, what do they need to change? Who do they need to get rid of?
Come on, dog.
It's like,
I mean, to me, this is, and again, as the Dodger homer, right? This is the same thing about, well, Dave Roberts has got to go. I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
10 times out of the last 11 years?
Yeah.
I can disagree with some of the moves in the postseason. That doesn't change the fact that the guy is very good at getting the team to the position. And, like, he doesn't have a spot in the lineup. He not have a place on the field. He's not pitching an inning. Anyways, to bring us back to the specific conversation.
And like, there's not a coach that's gonna guarantee you a World Series win.
Doesn't work like that,
no,
man.
That doesn't quite work like that.
Doesn't work like that.
If you got a coach that gets you to the playoffs every single year, that's a good coach. It's not like you can fire him and find the guy that's like going to win all the World Series with this group of kids, like talent. Like, it's not a thing.
Well, and if you can't, when you're working with the best athletes in the world and you can't just be like the World Series whisperer where you can just like say the most best things to walk a team into the World Series, how likely do you think it is when you are searching for the right team or the right program or the right coach or the right instructor that there's going to be one guy who's going to just say the thing to you that's going to change your trajectory in a meaningful and sticky way rather than spend 48 hours trying to make fire.
Yeah.
Spend 5 months grinding and eventually you unlock it, right? Like, so again, to come back to the chart, right? Spent 5 months not being able to hit a ball over 80 and now 80 is the norm. But 5 months.
Yeah.
5 months.
Yep. And that's, again, you're going through gameplay there where you're always going to, body's going to fatigue, you're always going to get worse. And you're also like dealing with, that was 14U year for that kid. So you're dealing with like physiological changes that like, when most of the time when the kids grow, like they have to relearn how to do a lot of the movements that they have become pretty comfortable doing, or they're just like slightly off in a lot of these movements. And
there's so much stuff that can change it, man. It's like you ding up one little section of yourself, you roll an ankle or, I don't know, man, just sleep over at a friend's house. Like all this stuff, it happens. And it can kind of change your trajectory. So the only course is you have to be consistent. I just,
And yes, you have to be consistent and consistent and consistent and resilient.
Yeah.
And you can't quit. Like that's, I don't want to be like, I'm not old enough to be like the guy on the front porch.
Sure. The get off my lawn guy. Yeah.
But like, and I don't honestly believe that, this generation quits, like every generation quits. Come on, man. Like every you can go back at every generation says this of the younger generation that they're a bunch of quitters or whatever. They don't, things have changed in my,
you've seen those, like the newspaper articles from like the early 1900s. Right. These kids today are so soft.
Right. It's like, yes, that is.
You didn't have refrigerators.
All, isn't that the point? Don't we want to make things easier for the people that come after us? So like it should I digress there, but
no, but you're right.
Like I don't want to be like, I feel like too many of these kids are quitters because like honestly, I blame the parents way more than the kids,
right?
Because like I don't blame most of these kids for going through some of these valleys and saying I want to quit. I blame the parent for not explaining that it's a valley,
right?
And there's going to be a peak, and the only way you get to hit that peak is by persevering, not quitting, being consistent. And bearing through this, and the parent that allows the kid to quit in the valley, their kid's just always going to be in a valley.
Yep.
Whether it's this valley or another valley, like you're never going to let the kid find his way to the peak if you allow an out every single time they're in a valley.
Yeah.
And like that is what makes me most upset about the team hopping stuff. It's not that like we lose players and I'm in my feelings because we lost players or whatever. Sure. It's like that kid is not going to get what he needs. And they're going to keep searching until they find it, which they won't. So really they're going to keep searching until that kid quits.
Yeah.
And just like
you've exhausted,
doesn't want to search anymore.
Yeah. You've either exhausted the economic or, economic in the form of the parents or the emotional resource of the child to want to do this thing any longer.
Because there's going to be a point where, all right, so this guy, he was 12, right? 22 by 12? 22 organizations by 12U?
It was 22 from 9U to 14U.
Oh, 9U to 14. Okay, yeah. So 22 organizations. It's a lot of organizations. Maybe when you left number 19, there was like an inkling in your head that, maybe number 3 had it right.
Sure.
Right? And you've probably burned that bridge. And like now can't go back there. So not only are you not doing your kid a disservice in that you're not letting them find the context in the failure and like overcome the failure and learn how to do that, which is a huge life lesson. But like you're just now closing avenues that they have of ever getting to that point.
Yeah.
So like if you leave 22, you turn around and nobody's willing to take you anymore. Because you bailed on 22 places and they're just not willing to spend the time with you and your kid because you now have this reputation of parents who are just going to like the first sign of trouble, I'm leaving and going to another team and taking my ball and going elsewhere. And like, there's just so many detrimental effects to conceding to your kid, whatever age. And like, I'm not saying don't ever quit. There's like definitely time and places to quit.
Sure.
But like, if the reason you're quitting is because you feel like your kid isn't developing and it's been less than a year, you've got a lot to learn about how development works and skill development.
And again, the thing I come back to is number one, how does that kid's trajectory change if you put a blast sensor or a DK sensor on his bat at 9? And simply just observe what's going on from 9 to 10 and 10 to 11. The other thing I wonder is, would that kid be more happy or more satisfied if they just stuck with one of those groups of kids that they started to begin with?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush, but I will say that, we are a zebra in a field of horses when it comes to our approach to doing player development on the youth space.
We might be a giraffe. Like zebras stick out, but like giraffes stick out.
Yeah. So if we are the proverbial giraffe on the, in the savannah desert, right? Wait, is the savannah actually a desert?
No, savannah, I think it's like a field.
Yeah.
You're thinking of the Sahara, probably.
Yeah. Okay. So if we're
Serengeti something. I think the Serengeti is like the name of a savannah.
Of a savannah?
Not a geography podcast.
Yeah, not a geography pod. I'm not going to win that category on Jeopardy. There are a lot of categories in Jeopardy I will not win, but that's definitively like fairly high up there.
And I'm not bad at geography normally, but yeah, that I don't exactly know what the Serengeti is, but I do know that a savannah is more like a field or a meadow.
Right. So you are you're the giraffe. Or we are the giraffe in the savannah. All these other orgs largely aren't doing much in terms of skill development. And if they are doing anything in skill development, I think largely they're missing the intersection of what we do in high performance and skill development to further fuel that stuff. So if both of those things are true, and you're playing for an org where the coach is a decent man or woman, and they seem fair, and they treat your child well enough, or let's just, maybe I can even just hope that they treat your child well.
Yeah.
Right? If I could go so far as to hope that those boxes are checked, you might as well just stay. Like what are you gaining?
Right.
Like honestly, what are you gaining?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. Right. And it's, we do like to compare this to school or other avenues. Is like, would you act that way in any other avenue? And it's like, if your kid was really struggling in math and you went out and got a private tutor and he does day 1 of the tutoring, next day gets a bad grade on his homework, are you just out on that tutor? Tutor number 2 now. Or are you going to do you let the kid develop a relationship with the tutor and actually let the tutor teach the kid
And then the
over
tutor
an extended period of time? Or is it just
give
like,
the-
I give you 1 hour. If you can't make my kid good at math in 1 hour, I'm moving on to the next person.
How long does it take a tutor to even understand where a kid's like learning deficiency or blocker even exist in the first place, right? What's the baseball kind of side of that coin? Are most of these guys doing lessons doing in an environment that actually kind of maps to competition? So you get an idea of what that kid's mechanics actually look like when they're trying to hit a round ball?
Nope.
Right. Right. So what do? We put them on a tee. You do this thing that's completely in abstract away from the actual task and competition.
Yep.
And then you just you ISO the crap out of him.
Right.
No, he doesn't do the move.
Yeah.
It's like we were going to kind of talk about this idea, like the Nikolai Bernstein, the repetition without repetition thing, this idea of training in a way where you're actually more conducive of unique movements so long as they solve the problem, right? Like, the Bernstein thing of like hitting, the factory workers hitting something with a hammer. Do you consistently hit the thing with the hammer? Okay, fine. I kind of don't care as much about the way that you do it.
Right.
If you're doing a hitting lesson and it involves a ball on a tee, and like that's the way that you assess, like, oh man, do I have some questions about the fidelity of that signal?
Correct.
Like, it's just that ain't it.
Yep.
But
I find a lot of the parents that leave quickly, it is very much my kid didn't develop.
Which is such a wild thing to say.
Yeah, it's like, you're right. It's been 5 weeks. Like, what did you really reasonably expect from 5 weeks? That like your kid would now be like an all-conference player? Like you would gain 10 miles an hour in throwing or batting velocity? Like, it has been 5 weeks, sir. This is a Wendy's. Like what? Like I don't understand what you reasonably expected, and like where we messed up when we brought you in here. Like, how did we not make it clear enough that like the only way we do development is long-term development, because short-term development's not a thing.
It's like people that like,
you have to be willing to sacrifice things in the short term to get long-term development. Yeah. Whether that's gameplay, whether that's results-based success, as the kid we talked about making a swing change. Like, you have to be willing to sacrifice something in the short term that you are, and most of the time you're sacrificing some sort of comfortability.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only way you get the long-term development. So if you're sitting there like, I really love the long-term development, like I want my kid to develop long-term, but there is nothing I'm willing to sacrifice in the short term to get that long-term development, then you don't want it that bad.
Yeah.
And if you're not willing to sacrifice some rougher game results, some 6-week peaks and valleys, like you're not in this for the right reasons.
You're not going to make fire.
You're not going to make fire.
You're not going to make fire.
That's a good way.
And, and it's just like, at the end of the day, there's a reason why I think people that are able to like retire, it's not and live well. It's not because their strategy is predicated on hitting the lottery. It's not like you're just going to walk into like the right convenience store on the right day and you're going to play the right numbers and that's your success strategy.
Right.
It's literally compounding interest, assessing risk, and being smart about ROI.
Right.
You can do the same thing with athletic and skill development. The difference is, I think, in that you still need to have that attachment to like loving this thing at a very deep level, because you're going to have to understand that like in those valleys, something has to compel you to continue to be consistent.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that,
and that can be shaped and helped.
Yes.
By a loving environment.
1,000%. And I'm, I'll retweet what I just said. Changing the conversation to ask questions like, what are you working on today?
Yeah.
Instead of this very binary game thing. Did you win?
Right.
Like
GPR today. Right. It's the same. It's the scoreboard question as opposed to the process oriented question.
And the reality is, if you ask that kid, like, what did you work on today? And they did PR, I assure you they're going to tell you about it. Yes. It's probably the first thing that they're going to say. And then you're going to get all this other context and framing about the objective of their change.
Right.
The objective of development.
Right.
Well, today we were working on, middle up fastball. So I'm just trying to like flatten out my attack angle.
Yeah.
That could be an answer from a 14 to 15 year old. For a 9 to 12 year old, I'm trying to hit the ball at the black mat over there. And I did that 7 times out of 10 or whatever. Or that 9 or 12-year-old could also have a blast sensor on there, and I'm trying to get to a positive attack angle.
Yeah.
You can't, like, I've seen it. I've seen you can communicate to young kids with this stuff. They understand numbers, helps them provide context. There's any number of different ways the coaches and parents that are involved in the ecosystem allows you to help push these kids towards a more positive framing of their participation.
Yep.
Which is very different than, you know, the every single weekend is life or death.
Right.
That's a great way to stratify and run kids away from this game.
Yeah.
So
time for my weekly segment that you don't know about.
Oh, weekly segment. I like it.
Which will only go on for a couple more weeks, and then I'll kickstart it again in the spring, unless I just like scroll through games and come up with examples every week. But
was this about the Chicago Bears?
No. Oh God, no. We had one good week where I was on a horse, not a high horse, but just a horse, and now I'm back on the ground underneath the horse. It's fine. Everything's fine. No. This is where this is Jeremy's weekly segment where he points out things that big leaguers do wrong that parents would scream at children.
I'm in
for.
on this.
All right, we had 2 big ones this week.
Yes.
We had one, ended a game, phenomenal catch by Michael Harris in center field. The throw he made after the catch, who the hell knows where that was going?
Sure.
Missed the cutoff man, missed both cutoff. I think it was a double cut, missed both of them.
Yeah.
Missed the second baseman. If it was not for Austin Riley seeing the throw, running to the spot, making a hell of a play.
Yeah.
To get the ball and make that throw an accurate throw to first.
Yeah.
We may be having a conversation about how if Michael Harris could hit a cutoff man, that game, that's double play in the game's over.
100%.
Right? Like, but anybody is talking about how it's an incredible play. And I did not hear one person mention that he missed that he just threw it into the ether. Like just towards nobody.
Kind of zooed it.
Right. Like the play was technically, I guess, at first in that scenario.
Yeah.
Right? And the best approximation is he tried to hit a cutoff or tried to throw it to second. Like, I don't really know where that ball was going, but like nobody's talking about that. It's just how great of a defensive play it was. But are we still talking about how great of a defensive play it was if Austin Riley isn't there to make that play?
Or we're talking about what a huge mistake it is on Harper's behalf.
On Harper's behalf, right? Like that's a really boneheaded base running play, and like brings me to the next one. And this happened last night. I think it was last night's game. Yeah, it was last night's game. Yeah. They don't blend together. I watched too much baseball. I don't know if you were watching last night's game. There was a fly ball. I can't remember where it was hit. Fly ball to the outfield. Altuve is on first. MVP award winner, multiple-time World Series champion.
Yep.
Good baseball player. He thinks that the ball is going to drop. He is like basically at second, maybe slightly past second.
Mm-hmm.
He does not retouch second base. So he goes back to first. He's safe. They appeal it. They go to the video. They call him out. You know how many times parents yell about tag plays at kids in games? And here is someone who's won an MVP in multiple World Series forgetting to re-tag second in the ALCS, and his team lost 2-0.
Yeah.
And that was in the later innings of the game, if I'm remembering correctly. Parents would go nuts. Maybe his parent was going nuts. I don't know. Altuve's parents, but like,
home would be like if Jose Altuve was like a 13-year-old
with
a conventional American baseball travel ball parent.
But these are things that happen, and nobody talks about them necessarily. And like, it was a Fox game, so I obviously have it on mute because I'm not listening to that guy who we all know who he is. So I'm listening on mute, so I don't know if he's like just tearing him apart for doing this or whatever, but like baseball players make mistakes. Even the best ones make mistakes, whether they're physical or they're mental. Please just allow kids the same space to make those mistakes. I didn't search Altuve on Twitter and see if a bunch of people were just like eviscerating him for not re-tagging second base, but like kind of doubt it. I don't know. Maybe they were.
I don't even want to check.
But like, yeah, just allow kids the same grace to make mistakes that we allow to the big leaguers who are really good at what they do.
Yeah, because the prototypical thing in that is to stigmatize, castigate the child, and then probably blame the org.
Yes.
Or blame the coaches.
Correct.
Right. And it's as if, in the suggestion there, that there is some sort of, baseball panacea we can all get to where like every player that walks through our doors is just going to magically have just like an almost AI level of baseball IQ where they're able to like shout out to El Jefe Cal Bodie's got me watching the AlphaGo documentary, which is free on YouTube, and I strongly suggest people check it out. But I'm at the part where he's like the first time going against the world champ. And they're just talking about like, yeah, the AI is just running like 50 to 60 moves in the future.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? People are people. We do not really have that capacity. And we're also talking about children.
Yeah, he keeps getting me to try to watch it, so I'll watch it at some point, maybe this weekend.
It's pretty gas.
But like the other part is not to say that, we're right and everyone else is wrong, but we're right and everyone else is wrong. Because Michael Harris, incredible athlete.
Yes.
Hits baseballs very hard.
Yep.
Throws baseballs very hard. Came to the major leagues at 20. Was he super polished? And did he have the highest baseball IQ? Nope, he was 20 and played a year and a half of minor league ball after high school ball in Georgia. So, like, probably not.
Right.
Doesn't matter because he's a really good athlete who throws it hard and hits it hard.
Right.
That's the gym look to the camera.
I mean, it seems like we're going to have a crop of like young kids that are going to be making that same thing. And it works out for the teams because the young guys don't really get great contracts. Which is a whole other.
Yeah. Well, it's starting to change.
Yeah.
I mean, the Braves are one of the reasons for that because they
just
whether or not you want to call some of their deals criminally underpaid, like they paid people into the future so that they don't have to deal with arbitration and stuff like that. Like Corbin Carroll already has like a massive contract with the Diamondbacks and he was a rookie. Like,
I mean, and to be honest, it's very different than like, Cody Bellinger going through ARB. When he was just coming off of like an MVP season where he got paid like $400K.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Yeah. But like the more, baseball is incentivizing because they know that that's a problem that's not going to get solved. That like it is cheaper to have younger guys who have more potential than an older guy but haven't consistently shown it than it is to just like pay the older guy.
Yep.
And they know that's not changing. So baseball's like gearing a handful of rules around forcing teams to bring up guys younger. And like don't delay the time, don't delay the clock, like bring them up. Like there's going to be benefits if you do that. And like the Diamondbacks are in the NLCS and the Orioles had the best record in the AL and both of them brought up a 20-year-old on opening day to start. I'm sure they knew that they were going to make some baseball IQ mistakes, mental mistakes. And they're like, we don't really care because Corbin Carroll and Gunnar Henderson hit the ball hard enough and throw the ball hard enough and are good enough athletes that, like, we're going to be very okay with them making 50 to 100 mental mistakes this year because we know the amount of positive value that they're going to provide is going to heavily outweigh that.
Yeah. And, like, to dip my toe into like the youth baseball bummer power hour. The worst thing about youth baseball right now is we have like zero runway for kids making those type of mistakes. And we fundamentally downplay or just do not give enough bandwidth and calorie burn towards the skill thing that gets you a Michael Harris.
Right.
So we're just doing the worst at
the
both
worst possible
of those things. At both.
Right.
Which is just an unbelievably toxic configuration. That I think it has it portends horrible things about the future of our game.
And you guys agree that's why you watch the podcast. So thank you.
Shout out to you guys. I think we're very much in the horse jello phase of the show on this particular topic. Axbat.com, code DL20, get yourself 20% off. Deven at drivelinebaseball.com, 2 E's for any big conventions, stuff that you guys are going to, high school coaches, youth coaches, whatever, holler at me. We are going to have to do like a big feature on the book, I think, sometime soon, because we're getting close to 6 weeks away from what I would generally anticipate to be like our pre-order date. Assuming we get everything done on time, but the manuscript's going to be done. Design is looking dialed. Shout out to Issa, my brother, Choppa. Choppa's the man. Choppa's also give me a little bit of bench press guidance.
We love you, Choppy Van Gogh.
Choppy's the man. I love that dude. Shout out to Cade, too, because he's there with us all the time. Thank you, guys.
Even though he's
listening.
a Packers fan.
Yes, obviously. How can you root for the Pack?
He's from Wisconsin. I don't hold it too far against it.
So thank you guys as per usual. The likes, the subscribes, the notifications, all that stuff helps. If you can do that, that's great. If you can rate the show, that's great. If you just listen, that's great too. We'll catch you next time.